Hello Whovians, and welcome to Whopinions, where I rank, rate and review all things Doctor Who. Now we all know that there are countless aspects of Doctor Who that help make the show as compelling and exciting as it is. But perhaps the most important one is the relationship that exists between the Doctor and their companions. Obviously, chemistry within the main cast is essential for any show to be successful, but as it transpires, Doctor Who can be especially easily made or broken by whoever is rattling around inside that iconic blue box through time and space. It can be the making of any episode, series, or even era, and it's something that's definitely very, very important to get right. So, without further ado, this is my top 10 TARDIS Teams. Number 10, the 12th Doctor and Clara. Now, this is a bit of a controversial one. I know a lot of people don't really like Clara as a companion, and I think that's a little undeserved. I think a lot of the issues people have with Clara's character stem from her debut season, opposite Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, as well as her complicated introduction and her thin backstory, which made her just feel like a bit of a duller version of the version of Clara we'd met in the preceding Christmas special, 2012's The Snowmen. She and the Doctor fell into those roles of pilot and passenger way too easily without really leaving any room for experimentation. But that all changed when the Doctor regenerated into Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, because Clara found herself with a very different Doctor. He was far more short-tempered, far less emotional, far less patient, and that really shifted their dynamic up a lot, because they both found themselves competing for the same or a similar role within the TARDIS. And that competition allowed them to reveal more stuff to each other, learn more about each other and from each other, and push the characters in unique and interesting directions. And even though the hybrid arc of Series 9 fell a little bit flat and was a bit underwhelming in the end, it still goes to prove just how much these two characters pushed each other and how much they went on to learn from each other within those two series they had together. Number 9, the 4th Doctor, Romana and K9. Now let's take a delve into the classic series, to season 17. One of the best things that Douglas Adams brought when he became the script editor of Doctor Who was a sense of equality for the first time really within the TARDIS. And K9 and Romana both represent this push to get the companions more on the Doctor's level. Romana is a time lord, so she knows as much about time travel and all the scientific wibbly-wobbliness of Doctor Who as the Doctor, probably more, because she didn't skive off from the Time Lord Academy to go and, jolly about the universe for hundreds of years. So she's probably more skilled than the Doctor is. And Mary Tam brought an elegance and a sophistication to the Time Lady, which very much fitted with the high stakes of 1978's The Key to Time arc. And then once that arc is finished, she regenerates into Lalla Ward's incarnation, who gradually morphs the character into someone who's a lot more fun-loving and optimistic and jovial, very much more in the Doctor's vein. And in turn, the Doctor mellows a bit and becomes less boisterous and a bit more understanding, and they kind of meet in the middle. And that's a lovely little narrative to follow. And in the middle of all that, you've got K9, who, despite being incredibly impractical on set, is one of the most famous and iconic companions of all of Doctor Who. He's just brilliant. Together they form this weird kind of space family with this kind of oddball married couple and their robot dog, made even more adorable by the fact that Tom Baker and Lalla Ward actually did get married, albeit very briefly. Number 8, the 1st Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara. Now let's go right back to the start. Even though the original companions may not have had quite such nuanced and in-depth character arcs and studies as later ones, what they did all have was a role. In the first original TARDIS team, everybody has a purpose and a role to play. You've got the Doctor, who's the centerpiece, the narrative focus that drives the plot and the story. He's the wise old man who knows how the universe works, who can teach those around him, who can teach the audience, who's there to investigate and explore, and who we follow. Then there's Susan, who is basically the audience surrogate. She's the young, fresh 60s teenage schoolgirl who can connect with all the kids watching at home. Even though she's a Time Lord and she's like 150 years old at this point, technically, she acts like a 16-year-old schoolgirl and she looks like a 16-year-old schoolgirl. So to all intents and purposes, she is a 16-year-old 60s schoolgirl from London, really. And she's still got all the universe to see. It's still fresh to her. And that's a nice change of pace to the Doctor, who's seen it all before. And then you've got Ian and Barbara, who are the safe pair of hands, the adults within the group. And each of them is specifically tailored to match the various challenges that they will face on their adventures and their journeys in the TARDIS. You've got Ian, who teaches science, and Barbara, who teaches history. Two subjects clearly, specifically chosen to reflect the show's original back-and-forth sci-fi historical episode pattern. Number 7. The 12th Doctor, Bill and Nardole. Most people will agree that Peter Capaldi's run as the 12th Doctor goes from strength to strength across his 3 series. And Series 10 represents the completion of this arc. It represents Capaldi at his final and finest hour. More calculating and patient, but also more compelling and passionate and compassionate than he's ever been. I mean, he literally spends 1,000 years teaching at a university just to keep an oath he made on behalf of Missy, his greatest enemy. And that's a university on Earth, full of humans. And then you've got Bill, who is like a connection to Earth, keeps the Doctor anchored to the planet, the university, the vault, and therefore to Missy, even while the Time Lord became increasingly restless to go out and explore the stars again. But she's also a fresh pair of eyes who's never seen the universe before, and it gives the Doctor a reason to go out and explore the universe again, to show it to her. So it's kind of a double-headed coin there. And also, let's not forget that Bill was the first openly gay character within the main cast of Doctor Who since Captain Jack Harkness, and she's all the more compelling for it. On the Doctor's other shoulder, you've got Nardole, as well as being just completely brilliant and adorable in literally every scene he's in, works to keep the Doctor grounded on Earth, keeps him focused on his pledge, keeps him focused on his mission to protect the vault, and acts as kind of his consciousness almost, his moral compass. And it gives him a sternness that he was kind of lacking in his first appearance in The Husbands of River Song. And it turns him into a really, really good character. And it keeps the narrative focus right at the forefront the entire way through the series. This creates a slightly different TARDIS team to anything we've seen before, but a really, really enjoyable one. It's one of the best examples of how to do a trio, and how to get them all firing on all cylinders, bouncing off each other, and it's exactly what the 12th Doctor needed ahead of his final stand. Number 6, the 9th Doctor and Rose. When Doctor Who came back in 2005, perhaps the 2 most important things Russell T Davies had to get right was the casting of the Doctor and the Companion. After all, if these 2 characters didn't land right and didn't sit right with the audience, every single episode would be burdened by it. Fortunately, he absolutely pulled it out of the bag. Eccleston brings a darkness and a maturity to the Doctor that we hadn't really seen in Classic Who, while Billie Piper brings a popularity and interestingness to the show, as well as completely revolutionising the idea and the role of the Companion. As characters as well, they work brilliantly. Their relationship just builds and builds throughout the series. It never feels rushed or pushed, but it's also not slow or static. It just goes at its own pace, and it feels really natural. And as much as I love the 10th Doctor and Rose. I think that the sort of subtle, under-the-surface romance that you get with 9 and Rose is probably almost better than the ostensible, out there, obviously falling for each other that you get with 10th Doctor and Rose. And let's not forget that if you didn't have those building blocks from Series 1 setting it up to get to that first kiss in The Parting of Ways, you couldn't push it further and explore it more and take it to new levels in Series 2. So, yeah, I think that the 9th Doctor and Rose was a really, really big game changer in terms of TARDIS teams. Number 5, the 4th Doctor, Sarah Jane and Harry. Now, for many fans, Season 12 of the classic series represents Doctor Who's finest hour. It's different and it's exciting and inventive, jam-packed with amazing stories and with a clear, interesting narrative journey which Doctor Who hadn't really done before, and it's very interesting to see how they try that out and experiment with it. It gave Tom Baker his first season as the 4th Doctor. It gave us the introduction of Davros and the genesis of the Daleks, and it gave us an amazing TARDIS team. Tom Baker's 4th Doctor is obviously the centrepiece, and he's on fire the entire time. He's a sort of unashamed, crazy magician from space. And he's brilliant the whole way through. He's loud and out of this world and very alien and very Doctor, full of energy, just as you'd expect from a Doctor that's fresh out of a regeneration. And then you've got Sarah Jane, who is an absolute fan favourite and really becomes a fan favourite in this series. And her chemistry with the 4th Doctor is obvious, a mile off, and present in every single scene. They get on so well, the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane, and it's not surprising that they are the iconic Doctor and companion when you think of a Doctor and companion in Doctor Who. And Sarah and Harry, both of them, keep the Doctor slightly anchored to Earth as he's trying to push away from UNIT and go see the stars again now that he's out of exile. And you can tell that because that series, for all of its crazy new ideas and out-of-this-world plot, is bookended by 2 conspiracy-based UNIT adventures in Robot and Terror of the Zygons, which proves that the Doctor has to return to Earth, if not for himself, and for his friends. Harry goes on a hell of a journey through this series. He goes from sort of overstressed military doctor with a very tricky patient to a respected equal within the TARDIS, who the Doctor is truly and justly proud of. And it just feels warm and cosy. This series was some of the first Classic Who I ever saw, and so it's got a really special place in my heart, and it's what I think of when I think of Classic Who. I think of Revenge of the Cybermen or Genesis of the Daleks, and it just works, you know? Number 4, the 3rd Doctor and Jo. During the early 70s, or is it 80s, UNIT dating, something very unusual and rare happened to the Doctor. He got a family, a proper family, the UNIT family, comprising of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, Sergeant Benton, Captain Yates, and Jo Grant, and they became some of his most loyal, longest lasting and trusted friends. But only one of these characters made the leap from earthbound colleague to companion within the TARDIS, and that's Jo. Even after the Doctor's exile had finished and he began to move away a bit from Earth and UNIT and explore the universe a bit more, Jo stayed with him, travelling in outer space in the TARDIS and getting to see the universe. And she became one of the most brave, resilient, dependable and trusted friends the Doctor has ever had, and is the iconic companion of the 3rd Doctor's era. And their relationship within the wider UNIT family is one of the reasons why that era of the show is still so fondly remembered by so many people. Number 3, the 10th Doctor and Donna. Donna Noble's contribution to the modern series of Doctor Who cannot be understated. She is probably the second most important companion in the modern series, behind Rose. And she gives the role a new and fresh, but also slightly classic taste. Because after 3 series of teased Doctor companion romances with an ever-changing cast, which finally began to run out of steam with Martha's storyline in Series 3, Donna Noble in Series 4 is something completely different. She's the Doctor's best friend, but that's it. There's nothing more. And that's why it works. Because they manage to pull out the best things from each other's character. The 10th Doctor and Donna Noble both become much better people through their adventures. And that's one of the most resonating things. When people talk about this duo, they say they made each other better. Donna Noble picks up where she left off from the Runaway Bride, and that's why she works as a friend to the Doctor, because there was no romance going on there. They were shouting at each other and arguing with each other most of the time. But in the middle of that banter and that kind of taking the mick, Donna begins to show more frequent demonstrations of trust and affection towards the Doctor. And they slowly begin to become better suited for each other. And that's why it's so sad, probably sadder than any companion death, when Donna has to forget everything, because all of that character growth that they've both gone through, it's completely undone. It's made redundant. Everything that you've grown to love about Donna Noble as a character, everything that you've seen Catherine Tate do that's just made her one of the best companions ever, it's completely reversed, and it's heartbreaking to watch. But the duo still stand as one of the best companion matches with a Doctor in the history of the show, and an example to everyone, whoever writes Doctor Who, of how to do a duo in the TARDIS. Number 2, the 7th Doctor and Ace. One of the most noticeable things about late 80s Doctor Who is just how much ground it managed to cover, how much it managed to affect and change the world of Doctor Who with so little resources, because the show was dying at this point. And nowhere is this more evident than in the Doctor and his companion, with Sophie Aldred and Sylvester McCoy, 2 absolute game changers. The 7th Doctor has a sort of darkness and mystery that had always been present in the character but never explored before. And Ace she's just cool. She's just awesome. She's an absolutely groundbreaking companion, and she's different to anything that's come before her, and everything really that's come after her. She's completely unique, and she's willing to take risks and be independent and question the Doctor, which is crucial. And the more you analyse this partnership, the more you seem to realise that it's basically a precursor for the modern companion dynamic that we've seen in the likes of the 9th Doctor and Rose, 10 and Donna, and 12 and Clara. They're kind of juxtaposing each other. They have a very, very complicated relationship. And you can tell that they do enjoy each other's company and they do trust each other, but it's on a fine line. And their adventures very much revolve around testing that trust and pushing it and seeing how far Ace can withstand the Doctor's manipulation, because that's essentially what he does for a lot of the time. He manipulates her, and it's a way of getting rid of the bad guy. And Ace has to go through a lot. So even though 10 and Donna are probably a better working duo and better paired for each other, the sheer audacity of these 2 characters, for me, has pushed them ahead of them by the finest of margins. And number 1, the 11th Doctor, Amy and Rory. Personally, I don't really think it could be anything else. Series 5, in my opinion, is probably the single best season of Doctor Who in the show's entire history, simply because of the impossibly thin thread that it managed to so perfectly balance on. Moffat managed to create a new, bold and exciting version of the show while not disregarding any of the stuff that worked from the previous eras, especially his immediate predecessor Rusty Davies. He took the very best of the Rusty Davies era and he distilled it into its purest form, then added a bucket load of Moffatisms which hadn't yet grown old, and basically just stirred. And what came out was an unmitigated masterpiece. And it shows in the characters. One of the best things about the Rusty T. Davies era was how grounded and down-to-earth the show became. And that was done through the companions. Because every companion, whether it was Rose or Martha or Donna, had a proper backstory. They had friends and family, they had jobs, they had connections on Earth, and that became part of the narrative. But those family of the companions were only ever reserved as assisted characters. They never made the leap to become companions themselves, with the exception of Mickey for a couple of episodes, and I guess Wilf, but not really. But that all changes when Amy and Rory come on, because they take that kitchen sink, humany, woominess, family dynamic and they bring it inside the TARDIS. I mean, Amy goes off on adventures with the Doctor, and within about half a series she's brought her fiancé along. And then, at the end of the Series 5 finale, the Doctor brings back Amy's parents. And we get this whole series of really focusing on Amy and Rory and their relationship, and then we get the other characters start to feed in a bit. We get people like Mel's, their childhood friend, come in, and even though it's a bit weird to have them come in that late, it gives you space on the more dominant characters before you start to feed in the other ones as well. But of course, speaking of Mouse, we get River Song. That's the thing, this dynamic doesn't just sit there and gather dust. It gets pushed as the characters go forward. They get pushed in new and interesting directions, and you get that with River Song, Amy and Rora's daughter, who's also the Doctor's wife. It's so Moffat, it's so perfectly timey-wimey, and it's exactly what you'd imagine a TARDIS-based family to be like. They really do grow as a whole, the Doctor, Amy, Rory and River, and by the time you get to like Series 7, it's really great to see, because they all just seem to get on so well. I mean, until about halfway through Series 6, Amy and Rory don't even really have a home. They literally live in the TARDIS until the Doctor gives them that house, and Rory his favourite car, and then gets them an ood. They're the companions of my childhood. They'll always have a very special place in my heart, and they really are a perfect example of how to make a busier TARDIS team of a trio or even a quartet properly work. They're some of the best remembered companions ever, not only by me and Kids of the Moffat era, but by everyone. They're the best, one of the best parts of that particular era of the show, and I can rewatch Moffat episodes purely just for their interactions, not for the plot or anything. They're just pretty much the epitome of what a Doctor companion dynamic can be. So, there you have it, my top 10 TARDIS teams. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why don't you tell me in the comments? And if there's anything that you think I've missed out and you think deserve a place in this list, tell me who and tell me why. Maybe you can shake up my rankings a bit if you convince me enough. Thank you everyone for watching this. And while you're here, if you're feeling generous, why not subscribe? Or go over to my TikTok. There's going to be some stuff. I do stuff over on TikTok, just little edits and stuff. Nothing that fancy. Certainly nothing as long as this. But yeah. So maybe try those out. Or I should be getting some more videos out on here. Now that I've finished all my exams and stuff, they should be a bit more frequent. Maybe every couple of weeks. Maybe, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone who watches this, and really appreciate anyone who subscribes to me. Till next time, happy times and places.